Hello and welcome to GTA 5 Online. Today we're going to be doing a special episode. I've been trying to record this for a while. This is about settings on the PC, so graphics settings, anything that affects how the game is rendered, how the game, how many frames per second you get. And I'm really just going to be talking about the go-to girls, so the stuff that's really going to affect your game and how you play it. Under graphics, you'll see that there's a video memory limit. That's the amount of VRAM you actually physically have on your graphics card. You don't normally see that in a game. It's the first time I've seen it, to be honest. And you're going to want to tweak all these settings to fit within the VRAM limit, or if you ignore suggested limits, you can probably go about 200 megs over without too much difficulty. So first of all, you've installed the game, or you just reinstalled it, or you're just tweaking your settings. You want to make sure the resolution is right for your monitor. You're going to want to make sure the aspect ratio is right for your monitor, which is 1920 by 1080 is a 16:9 aspect ratio. The other thing you're going to want to do is find population density and knock that down to about half. What that's going to do is save you some frames, but also make it so that roads aren't actually rammed full of cars, so that if you're playing a mission and you're driving away and you're trying to go quite quickly, you don't have just wall-to-wall cars everywhere. It saves frames and it saves your sanity. Next up is texture quality. You're going to want to tweak that so it fits within your VRAM limit, and usually if you've got like 2 gigs you probably want to turn that to high. If you've got more than 2 gigs, crack it up to very high and kind of fire and forget there. If you're struggling to fit things into your VRAM limit, then population variety and distance scaling can be pulled back. Specifically population variety, if you pull that down, then you'll probably free up some memory. Reflection MSAA, that's a reflection anti-aliasing, can be turned off, because who needs anti-aliasing in a reflection? Now, one of the big things, one of the big hitters when it comes to losing frames, especially in the morning and the evening, is the particles quality. I found that in the morning and the evening in the game, or when you fire a gun, everything goes a bit stuttery. And that seems to be related to volumetric smoke. If you have it on very high or high, try turning it down to normal. If you have it on normal, turn it down a bit more. Things like tire smoke where you're wheel spinning, or having an accident, if you crash into something, it generates a little volumetric particle which actually stays there for a while and cripples your frames. Volumetric smoke looks great, but it seems to be a little bit broken in this game. Similarly, if you're driving across country and you're finding everything slows down when you hit the green stuff, turn the grass quality down from very high or high down to normal or below. That means blades of grass normal or below aren't rendered, and you should drive as fast on the road as you do on the grass, or vice versa. If you have motion blur on, turn the PC off and go outside. Ambient occlusion seems to be a little bit broken. That is, we have an object and it gets in the way of light, it should cast shadow on the opposite side. Does seem a little bit broken though, so if you have it normal, leave it on normal. Don't need to turn it any higher than that. Shader quality, you could probably get away with high or even normal. It doesn't really seem to have that much of an effect on FPS, but you could probably scrape a few frames here and there. Doesn't make too much of a difference between very high and high, if I'm going to be honest. Shadow quality, that is the one you're going to want to turn down if you're having trouble with shadows. That is the one where if you have headlights and it's on very high, or I believe high, and you drive past something, your headlights are going to cast shadows. Turn it down to normal if you're having problems driving around with your headlights on. Anti-aliasing is another big hitter in this game when it comes to losing frames per second. Now, I found that having FXAA on, or fast approximate anti-aliasing, which is a depth-aware edge filter, it's also a post-process, kind of makes things a little bit more blurry, but it fills in the areas that MSAA misses. MSAA is multi-sample anti-aliasing, and that sample pixels on the edges of polygons, and you can either have that times 2, times 4, times 8. The higher the MSAA, the slower or the less frames you're going to have. Most people will want to run FXAA on an MSAA times 2 and kind of leave it at that. You're still going to get jaggies on the edges of things, and there's not really much you can do about that. So textures, shadows and things, especially if they're far away, they're still going to be aliased. There's nothing you can do about that, I'm afraid. If you have an nVidia card, nVidia's TXAA, some people recommend turning on. I do not, because it has some weird effects with certain textures. The yellow stripe on the Annihilator gunship becomes very jagged with TXAA on. I'm not sure why that happens, but well, I'll just leave that off for the time being. One of the counterintuitive things is to actually turn VSync on. I would recommend turning it on, because when you look left and right, or turn left and right in the game, it can have a strange slowing down effect. Not just screen tearing, but everything seems to go a little bit lumpy. for want of a better word. VSync will have an effect on your frames though. It's going to try and tie your frames to your monitor's refresh rate as best it can. What that means is if your monitor's refresh rate is 60 Hz, it'll try and run either at 60 frames. If it drops below that, it's going to try and run at 30 frames, 20 frames, 15, 10 and so on. It's always going to be divisible into 60. However, if you're getting above 30 frames, it's not really going to matter, if we're going to be honest. Okay, there's a few other things I wanted to talk about, and one of those is related to the ERR-GFX D3D INIT crash to desktop error. And what I've been doing is I've been going around looking at forums and stuff, and basically people are recommending that you underclock your graphics card. Now, if anyone ever recommends you underclock your graphics card, go find a table to flip and flip it. Just rage flip it. If you can't find a table, find a baby or something like that. Just rage flip something. Basically what I found is that it's a component within DirectX that keeps crashing, and if you look at the error logs, there's not really a lot you can do about it. I think it's something to do with the game rather than DirectX. I'm not really sure what causes it, but I have reinstalled everything from scratch on this computer and it hasn't actually made a difference. It occasionally crashes every now and again. The best thing I've found is actually to roll your driver back. Now if you're an nVidia user, the best driver seems to be the 353.06 driver, rather than currently the latest 353.30, which just seems to crash all over the place and has a few performance issues. If I'm going to be honest, it might just be me, it just might be my system. The way you can get hold of that driver, if you haven't already got it, is to go to the nVidia website and then look up beta drivers and older certified drivers and just download it from there. And drive it from there. Yeah, boy. Okay, one of the last things you can do if you're really desperate to scrape some frames is to actually go into the graphics settings, find DirectX options and change that down from DirectX 11 to DirectX 10.1. So the last thing I'm going to do is actually drop out to the desktop and have a look at specific settings made in the nVidia driver. Now if you're an ATI user, this is probably not going to interest you that much, and this is probably where we say goodbye. But for nVidia users, there are a few little tweaks and bits and pieces you can actually do in the drivers. So if you're an nVidia user, what you're going to want to do is right click on the desktop, find the nVidia control panel, click on that, and it'll bring up this window here. What you're going to want to do then is click on Manage 3D Settings, go to Program Settings, and find your GTA 5 executable. Now if it doesn't appear in this list, you can click on Add, and then go into the Steam folder or the install folder and find the GTA 5 executable. Some of these settings affect stuttering in the game. In fact, most of them should do or should have some effect. What I've done is I've just changed maximum pre-rendered frames to 1. Some people recommend 3 to have a larger cache. To be honest, I think 1 is absolutely fine. The multi-display mixed GPU acceleration, you have one monitor, single display performance mode should be the one for you, although to be honest I don't think this really affects that much. It's just something nice to have. Threaded optimization and triple buffering are switched on. I think they're off by default, but that should help with stuttering in the game. I'm not sure how much it helps since we've tweaked a bunch of settings already. I think the go-to girl for that is probably the reducing particles in the game, but every little helps. Multi-frame sampled anti-aliasing or MFAA is only available on 900 series cards or newer as far as I know. What that should do is it should help out the in-game MSAA or multi-sample anti-aliasing. Some people reckon that having ×2 multi-sample anti-aliasing on in the game and MFAA on in the driver control panel is the equivalent of having ×4 MSAA on in the game without the processor overhead. Your mileage may vary, however. So I'm going to leave it there. If you're liking this video, please like, favorite and subscribe if you found it helpful in any way. Tell your friends about the channel because that always helps. And we will catch you next time.